Asian street markets are a sensory experience like no other, filled with bold flavors and exciting textures. These streets offer countless snacks, often featuring ingredients and preparations that are new to those of us in the West. Among the many street food delicacies that capture attention, there's one dish that stands out, and yes, it might surprise you. It's chewy, it's packed with flavor, and it has a special place in Asian street food culture. Join me as we explore the unique and fascinating world of duck tongues and why they've become a sought-after street food across Asia. Let's start by breaking down what duck tongues actually are. The name says it all, they're literally the tongues of ducks, harvested as a specialty food item. But what makes them particularly interesting is their texture and the skill required to prepare them properly. Unlike what you might think, duck tongues aren't similar to other poultry parts like wings or legs. They're unique in their structure. Each duck tongue has a central bone or cartilage running through it, adding a slight crunch to its otherwise soft, meaty texture. This makes it especially enjoyable to chew on, creating a kind of satisfying, layered mouth feel. Duck tongues might sound unusual, especially to those who haven't grown up with them. In many parts of Asia, however, they're cherished and seen as a delicacy, appearing not only in street markets but also on high-end restaurant menus. This is partly because duck tongues require careful cleaning, preparation, and seasoning, and partly because they're simply not as common as other cuts of meat. To make it more accessible, duck tongues are often served in skewer form or in a flavorful sauce, bringing out the rich umami taste that Asian cuisines are famous for. Now, let's talk about the cultural significance of duck tongues in Asia. In traditional Chinese culture, duck is considered a cooling food, often served to balance out flavors in a meal. Duck tongues, like other duck parts, have been incorporated into Chinese cuisine for centuries, especially in areas where duck farming was a primary industry. Over time, this practice spread to other East Asian and Southeast Asian countries like Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam. Duck tongues were initially seen as a resourceful way to make use of every part of the animal, reducing food waste and honoring the animal itself. This sustainable approach to cooking is a key part of many Asian culinary traditions, which value using every edible part of an ingredient. The practice of using duck tongues and other unusual cuts gained cultural and culinary value as street food markets became more popular. Now that we know a bit about what duck tongues are and their cultural roots, let's dive into how they're prepared. Duck tongues are quite versatile in terms of flavor combinations and cooking techniques. In China, duck tongues are often marinated and stir-fried with soy sauce, garlic, ginger, and spices like star anise. This gives them a rich, slightly sweet, and savory flavor. They may also be braised until tender and served with chili oil for a spicier kick. In places like Taiwan, duck tongues are commonly grilled on skewers over an open flame. This process enhances their texture, giving them a slightly charred, crispy exterior while keeping the inside juicy. Taiwanese vendors will often coat them in a thick, sweet sauce made from soy, garlic, and sugar, creating an irresistible caramelized crust. In Japanese cuisine, you might find duck tongues served as part of a yakitori selection, or Japanese grilled skewers. Here, they're often seasoned more simply with salt and a light glaze, allowing the natural flavors to stand out. And in South Korea, duck tongues may be seasoned with a spicy gochujang marinade, adding a depth of heat and sweetness that Koreans love in their dishes. Each region has its own approach, but they all highlight the unique taste and texture of duck tongues while balancing flavors that are distinctly Asian. Now, why exactly have duck tongues become so popular as a street food item? A big reason is their perfect balance between novelty and tradition. Duck tongues offer a unique experience. They are slightly chewy, flavorful, and unusual, which draws in adventurous eaters. At the same time, they're prepared in familiar, comforting ways that locals already know and love. In street markets across Asia, there's a long-standing tradition of using every part of an animal to reduce waste, which resonates with people in an increasingly sustainability-conscious world. Street vendors showcase a wide variety of foods that other cultures might not use, but that's part of what makes these foods both affordable and interesting. And the affordability is another key reason. Duck tongues are accessible to a broad range of people. They're a cheap, protein-rich snack that's packed with flavor, so they fit perfectly with the street food vibe. So what can you expect when you actually bite into a duck tongue? The experience is truly one of a kind. Duck tongues have a distinct, multi-layered texture. They're soft and slightly fatty, with a subtle crunch coming from the central cartilage. This combination is something you don't really find in other cuts of meat, which adds a lot of appeal to those looking for something different. The flavor is mild on its own, but it takes well to sauces and marinades. When duck tongues are grilled, braised, or stir-fried, they absorb the flavors of the marinade beautifully, enhancing each bite with layers of umami, spice, or sweetness. That adaptability allows vendors to cater to different tastes, whether it's a fiery peppercorn-infused dish in China or a salty, slightly smoky skewered snack in Japan. It's interesting to see that, even though duck tongues have long been a delicacy in Asia, they're still quite rare in Western cuisine. However, this might be changing. With the rise of global cuisine, more people in the West are open to exploring unusual foods, especially those that are popular in other parts of the world. Asian restaurants and street food-inspired eateries in cities like New York, London, and Los Angeles are beginning to experiment with duck tongues on their menus, often prepared with a twist to appeal to local tastes. Chefs are recognizing that duck tongues are a great way to introduce Western audiences to a more adventurous side of Asian cuisine. While they're still a niche offering, duck tongues could gradually make their way into more international kitchens as part of a broader trend of using the whole animal and embracing unique flavors and textures. Duck tongues are more than just an unusual food item. They represent a fascinating blend of culinary tradition, cultural values, and creativity. Their popularity in Asia's street food scene speaks to a spirit of experimentation, adventure, and resourcefulness that defines the best of street food. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.